All right, folks, welcome to this 60-second episode of the REBT Advocates with Dr. Michael R. Adelstein of 3minutetherapy.com and me, Tommy Bateman. REBT has the ABC model: A, activating event; B, belief; C, the emotional consequence. And then we go to D, disputing. Michael, where does this come from? Where does this D come from?
To back up, Tommy, I wanted to mention why we're discussing the D, or at least my idea. I'm sure you have yours. And that is, D is simply a question asking, what is the evidence for my irrational belief? And it's easy to gloss over. It's easy to go to E, effective new thinking. So you go from B, my irrational belief, I must do well and get approval. And then you jump to E, no reason I must do well and get approval, although I prefer to. But I think D is actually the most important part
Me too.
of the ABCDEF, because at D, when you ask for the evidence, the idea is to really think about it. Is there any evidence for my must? Where does this evidence exist, and in what form does it exist? What's the data? What's the proof that my must makes sense?
You see, this is the part where I think REBT gets a whole lot fun. It's fun at this point. We get to debate and really get into the meat of things and question the evidence for things and really dig our hands into it. But go on. Yeah, this is just my favorite part.
Yeah, good. So that's why I want you to think about it when you come to D. And you can form D by saying, why must I, or what is the evidence I must get approval, or who says I must get approval, where is it etched in stone, what's the data? So there are different ways to form the question, but it's basically the same question. Now, the reason we do this is because we're basing REBT loosely on the scientific method, and the scientific method comes up with hypotheses like the earth is flat, and then we test the hypotheses and see if there's evidence for it. I sail east, and if I come around on the west side of the country, then
you hit a dome.
The world is round or oval, something like that. And if I fall off, then I have evidence that the world is probably flat. You were saying, Tommy?
Oh no, the world is flat. We just hit a dome, and it's like out of one of those Jim Carrey movies. Moving on.
Yeah. But we'll leave those facts aside from the Flat Earth Society.
Yeah.
So we're using the scientific method, and one of the reasons why that's natural to use the scientific method is we're all little scientists. We live our lives according to how we see the evidence. So, for example, if my alarm goes off at 6 a.m. and I get up, it's because I think there's more evidence that says if I get up, I'll have more advantages than if I stay in bed. So everything we do, we live on evidence for and against. And even young kids are little scientists. They look for evidence. A 3-year-old might believe in Santa Claus because he or she believes that it's this guy that leaves presents on Christmas morning and flies through the air in a red suit pulled by reindeer. The kid thinks that, and then when he becomes 5 or 6 and thinks about the evidence, sees that there is no evidence for Santa Claus, that it's just his parents who leave the presents, and it's just normal people in red suits and white beards dressed up on street corners, pretending to be Santa Claus. So even children are looking for evidence and building their life on evidence.
And see, what's nice about this is, although we're little scientists, it's not like we have to go out and do a bunch of experiments all the time. In fact, 99.9% of the time, the knowledge that's relevant to your emotional disturbance to challenge that irrational B is already in your head when it comes down to it. Where is it written in stone that you have to be loved? Have to. Not, it's preferable to, have to. And you can just think about it. Well, that doesn't exist anywhere. You can scour all the religious texts. If you believe one's true, No, no, there is no have to in any of them. Where is it written in stone that you must perform well? Where is it written in stone that life must be a certain way? Life must be comfortable. Well, geez, we have evidence for the opposite of that, where life actually is pretty painful from time to time. So obviously, the life must be comfortable thing is not there. It doesn't exist. So you can just ask yourself these questions, maybe even be your own Socrates and logic yourself out. There's a nice little chain of logic that you can follow to get yourself to a more rational E that we'll use as our new B.
That's a great point about thinking about it. In order to ask yourself about evidence, it doesn't even involve an empirical process of looking in the real world or outside of yourself for evidence. You could just think about it. If I think I must get approval, must means a law of the universe. It has to be this way. And the only way there could be a law of the universe is if I ran the universe. And if there was a law of the universe, how could I not get approval? I couldn't go against the law of the universe. So if you just think about that, you'll see there's no evidence for the must. And similarly, on the global evaluations, if your belief is I'm no good because I did poorly, then you can ask yourself, well, what does a human being consist of? A human being consists of someone who acts and acts well at times and acts poorly at times. You don't have to look outside of yourself to see that people act well or act poorly. You know that this is part of being human, so obviously you can't be a worthless or rotten person as a total person, or you can be as an imperfect human who acts imperfectly. So thinking is one way to follow up the question of what is the evidence. Now the question, what is the evidence, looks for empirics, data, but in addition to thinking about it, you can also look at the logic. Is there logic that says, because I prefer to do well, therefore I absolutely must? Is it logical to say that preferences are automatically become musts? And obviously that's false.
Now, one of the things I wanted to mention, I'm sorry to interrupt, is while we're thinking about the evidence, you also mentioned the global rating of human beings. One of the things we have to think about is the methods, right? So how do you weigh a human being to begin with? Is that possible for a human being to do? What is important? What is heavy? Is good deeds heavy? Is curing cancer a really heavy thing for the good side? And is stealing that pack of bubblegum really light? What makes a bad human being? Do you even know? Do you even know the standards? So you don't have a method to doing that. So while good science, good scientific method has good methods to employ, the same thing can be said for REBT itself. What methods, what thinking method are you using? Sorry to interrupt, Michael.
That's right. No, that's okay. And looking for the evidence assumes, as you're implying, Tommy, that there's some facts or data to answer the question, whereas really it's not, there are no facts and data to prove that you're a good or a bad person.
That's right.
The whole thing is subjective. It's just based on your decisions, your subjective decisions, and there's no data outside of you to prove that. So those are some of the main reasons we use D, and some of the ways to answer the D. Another one is pragmatics, which is, does it work for me to believe I must do well or life must go well? Does it work for me to demand that someone who I don't control act the way I want them to act? And normally the answer is no. All it does for you is make you miserable to have these demands. So empirically, logically, and pragmatically, it doesn't really hold water. So therefore, at E, you would start with no evidence. There's no evidence for my musts or my shoulds. Tommy, is there anything else you wanted to add to the D?
There's about another hour's worth of stuff I would like to add, because this is my favorite part. And I'm sure if you watch the rest of our episodes, you can see us actively engaging in this step of the ABCDEF method of REBT. We do it all the time. It's fun. This is what makes therapy fun for me. and actually made it very fun for a lot of my clients. And in fact, I've seen people, once they actually introduced the concept of doing a disputing action, they've actually almost instantaneously started to heavily believe this new thought because they did the process of disputing it. And from there, they became much healthier. But that's all I got tonight.
Okay, very, very good. Well, thanks for watching, and don't forget to leave your comments below, especially questions. And please subscribe and give us a like to stay on the rational side of life.